Pleased to host you here today. Advance Queensland procurement has been a really important issue for Advance Queensland. The roadmap released mid last year acknowledges the importance of finding customer pathways for our startups and scale-ups in Queensland. After 8 years of investing, or nearly 8 years of investing in Advance Queensland, the government's keen to see that commitment through to real changes for businesses and for what's happening in Queensland. We want to keep businesses here. We want to keep them growing here, and customers are really important to that. We often hear statements around contracts are more important than grants. I think getting a government contract is one contract you can seek. It gives the credibility of having had a customer and gives you the support that you may need to seek further investment as well. In the Queensland Government, we are working on addressing the procurement challenges. We've got some people here today that we'll talk to, Matthew over here. And we are looking at how do we make it easier to procure for the Queensland Government, but also for yourselves. We also have a private sector pathways program, which is about how do we create customers through corporates. So Advance Queensland is partnering with several corporates, such as the Queensland Urban Utilities, the Marta Group, Boeing, and several others, which is about how do we actually get startups into their businesses as well. We want to continue to work on the conditions that make it easy to procure. For yourselves, sometimes procurement can be a complicated, red tape, administratively difficult thing to do. And guess what? It's the same for public servants. There are about 200,000 Queensland public servants, a bit over actually. Now, not all of them procure, but lots of them might want to buy something during the course of their employment, and they need to go to somebody who knows how to procure that for them. Within my team alone, we've recently tried to procure from a startup. Well, we have procured from a startup. And I can tell you the frustrations for a public servant are as high as they are for the startup. So we do need to complete lots of forms. We need to address our risk and do all those sorts of things. So we are as ambitious about trying to overcome this challenge as hopefully yourselves are as well. So we're working closely with our colleagues in environment, energy and public works to try and make it easier for yourselves as well as for us. Because to be frank, if I hadn't been so determined, I might have just said, let's not worry about this, we'll just go to a usual provider. But that's not what we do. We want Advance Queensland to see all the startups that we've invested in and the researchers that have turned things into projects, into companies, and the investors that have invested and backed those companies to find their pathway to their customers. We have one success story here in the Precinct, a company called FloodMap. They've been doing great things. They worked with the Logan and Bow Desert Council areas in the floods of last year, and their own work, which is about mapping in real time where flooding's going, saved lives. That's a really critical thing. And they're now branching out into the US, having made it into the RISE Urban Mobility Challenge. We also have in the precinct just behind here a group called eHealth. They've been away for a while. I guess the pandemic probably kept them a bit occupied with some other things to do, but they're now coming back and are keen to engage with the ecosystem as well. We know that the startups have the solutions to the challenges that the Queensland Government needs to solve. We need to work out how to make it easier for everybody involved to make that happen. So today is about a conversation about how do we start to learn what we can do, both internal to government and external to government, to make that more likely. So I'm going to hand over to Julia Spicer, Queensland's, I nearly lost count, 5th Chief Entrepreneur. I was going to say 4th, 5th Chief Entrepreneur, and Queensland's first regional Chief Entrepreneur, hailing all the way from Goondiwindi. Julia herself is a startup and a small business owner and extremely passionate about how do we make it possible for startups, small businesses right across the state to be making a difference to how the Queensland Government delivers its services. So over to you, Julia.
Thanks very much. Can we please give Lee a round of applause for the welcome? And also to know that somebody with the role that Lee has as our DDG for innovation is really genuinely keen to make sure that the challenges that we see on either side of this procurement piece we can actually be solving with each other, hence today's conversation and what we're doing. So I would like to welcome you all for being here today. We are recording today. We're not live streaming, but we are recording. So we want to make sure we can capture people's questions as the session goes on and make sure that we've got a chance to really answer the questions. Before I actually introduce the panel of people who are speaking, can I please actually get you to say hello to the person next to you for two reasons. Maybe you don't know them. It would be really good to find out who they are, why they're here, and see what they want as an outcome for today's conversations, because potentially you're already sitting beside somebody who can help you with what you're wanting to do. So while the panel gets themselves sorted, can I ask you to introduce yourself to the person next to you, why you're here, what you want to get out of today's conversation? I might have lost you all at the beginning. Can I bring us back together, please? So, I'm taking from the level of energy that came from the introductions that we've got a few questions and we've got some conversations we want to have today, which is fantastic. Before we launch into them and we hear from our panel, can I just get, let's just do raising of hands so that we get a bit of a feel for who's in the room. Who are startups who want to work with government? Who in the room are business? Righto, can the three government people that haven't raised their hands... No, who's government in the room? Can you put your hands up? Okay, great. So the rest of us are going to track you down as today goes on, okay? We're going to find out who you are, what department you work with, and how we can talk about our business and be able to build a relationship with you. Because I think you'll find that's one of the themes that will come through today is who do we know where and how do we understand what each other do. For those of us that are businesses in the room, how many of us are working already with, let's start with state government. Who's already working with state government? Who's working with local government? Any of your councils? Okay, there's a few of us. Federal government? Great. What about industry groups, just broadly if I call industry groups? Yep, okay, so there's a few of us in that space as well. Anybody working with any governments or councils outside of Queensland? Okay, great. So hopefully we're noticing who's putting hands up and not putting hands up, because that could be a really good contact for us later. As Lee said, I live out at Gundawindi and have spent most of my working life across southwest Queensland. My business, we have worked with every state and territory department other than ACT. We haven't done a contract with them for a few years. We work with local councils, we've done contracts with federal government, and importantly we also do quite a bit of work with industry groups as well, so both in the agricultural industry space and also in some of the infrastructure space, so ARTC, inland rail kind of activities that are happening in the regions. So I'm really happy to have a chat with people over a cup of tea and some scones or whatever has been organised for us later. But what we've really got this morning is the opportunity to hear from a few people who are working in the space, have had experience in the space, and have the opportunity to help us really look at how we can do what we want to do in terms of working with government. So I'm actually going to throw to our panel now to introduce themselves. We've got some questions that we want to ask, but also at different times I'm going to throw to the audience for questions that you might have of the panel. We're going to go through until about 11:30 and have a break, and then there's a chance for you to go and actually speak to some people and follow up on the conversations that might have happened. So you've got a bit of a plan of multiple opportunities to be able to ask the question that you might have come along with today. Sarah Jane, I'm going to start with you. People may have stalked you all on LinkedIn already to see who's talking with them for the next hour or so. If they haven't, Sarah Jane, what would you like people to know about you?
So I'm Sarah Jane Peter-Schlingman, the Managing Director and sole owner of ATEC. ATEC is a mission-critical provider. We provide cloud hosting and web development for mission-critical websites and web applications. We work with all levels of government, local, state, federal and foreign government, just focusing on those mission-critical systems. So that means that if your website or web application goes offline or has a security breach, that's a disaster. It could be impacting revenue, reputation, or health and safety. So examples of that are Brisbane City Council websites or flood warning systems for SEQ Water, aviation safety systems, or sale event platforms for Virgin Australia. If any of those go offline or have security breaches, it's chaos. So we prevent all of that.
As somebody who flies a lot, I'm really glad the aviation piece is a mission critical thing. That's very important. Thank you. Matthew, what about you?
Good morning. God, that's very loud. That's a really old picture, by the way. So that is actually me. It's about 15 years old. I didn't have a current one I wanted to share. So my role is industry engagement for whole of government. So what does that mean? My background is IT procurement and vendor management, but I essentially help suppliers sell to government in the ICT category. There are 6 categories across government, and my role is kind of twofold. It's helping industry with a big focus on small business. We manage the small business policy, SME policy for whole of government, but it's also about engaging with our procurement network, consisting of category managers, contract managers, procurement people. I have lots of robust conversations with procurement people, mainly because I'm trying to get them to achieve our targets around Queensland SMEs, around First Nations, social enterprises. So I'm a glorified concierge, really, who hopefully opens the door to have a better experience, because the key thing you need to take away from this, really, in my opinion, is that, yes, we have a Queensland procurement policy, we have all these things in place which are great, but we have 21 departments with 21 processes. Your procurement experience will not be the same in every department, so you need to be aware of those nuances, and that's where Thomas and his role, I think, also helps in getting small business across the line.
That's a good segue, Thomas. Do you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Now? Yep. Cool. Tom Pollock, I'm founder of GovReady. I, like a lot, or some of you who didn't put your hand up earlier, I spent years stumbling around trying to figure out what government wanted from their providers. I made every mistake you could possibly make. Over time, though, we started to understand what government was looking for, particularly in their smaller business partners. And once we'd cracked that, then the government opportunities started to, well, small ones to start, but then they moved to much larger opportunities. Now, I don't do any of that. Our business is designed, we exist, the only reason we exist is to help other predominantly Queensland businesses to not make all the mistakes that we made in the early days. So we help them get ready for government business, help them become much more attractive to government, and then help them engage with government in the right way. And probably talk about that a little bit more later today, but yeah, that engagement piece is really, really key. So yeah, that's me. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. We'll talk a bit more about some of the work that you might be able to do with people in the room over the next few weeks. Matthew, I want to start with you, and you already mentioned, you know, there's 21 departments and therefore 21 processes. I guess part of what we want to be able, the conversation we want to have today is what do the rest of us not know that we need to know? Your point about being a concierge, I think, is a really valid one. Sometimes it's actually just knowing who we need to talk to about some of this. But can you start with talking a little bit around, you know, what's the role of a procurement team and what do we as businesses in the room need to know if we're, you know, if we're wanting to work with people in that space?
Absolutely. So the first thing I want to really say is that there is no such thing as a stupid question in dealing with Queensland government, or any government in fact, because I think people have certain ideas how things operate, and the reality can be very different. So the area I'm actually based in is a procurement area, but we don't actually buy stuff. We set up buying stuff. We manage all the whole of government ICT panels. So they range, there's 30 of them. They range hardware, software, telco services, and there's a very, very high presence of Queensland small business on those panels. And we're looking, obviously now there's a target in place to onboard even more. So that particular procurement area are very much, because we're whole of government, we procure or establish procurement arrangements for all departments and the next layer of government to leverage. You know, so it's the Microsoft agreement, it's SAP, it's the big sort of enterprise type things, but we do have a very good services panel, which again is open for small business to join. That includes startup and scale-ups. A procurement area, back to my comment about the process, will have their own process. The second most common question I get asked is, how many quotations do you get for going when you go to market? Is it a tender? Is it not a tender? The basic distinction for me is that if you call something a tender, you're pretty much implying its significance. So everything you see on Q tenders will typically be a new requirement. It will not be associated with a standing offer arrangement or a panel. It'll be a new, and it'll be a large procurement activity. And that obviously involves a procurement area having an evaluation panel, having a lot more governance over how that's run. The vast majority of procurement does not go through Q tenders. It goes through government buyers going to their local panels. Our large departments have their own panels, education, transport, health, or going to whole of government panels. And their own local process will determine if they get 1 quote, 2 quote, 3 quotes. Things like the small business policy say they have to go to a Queensland SME, at least 1 out of 3 quotes, as an example. But this is the ongoing challenge we face in trying to get startups, small business, is that when they approach these departments, it sometimes will be more challenging some departments than others. But the procurement, I guess the second major point to make is that some procurement areas are much more mature than others. They're much bigger than others. So you look at those big departments, the procurement person will be, in some cases, the decision maker, depending on what they're procuring. In other departments, the business area will be the decision maker. There's no clean slate to say, they do this, they do that. It changes, and it's all down to the risk and the scale of what they're procuring.
So can I just ask a really specific question on that before I go to another area? Is, you know, you spoke about the local panels, like how we all know how to find Q tenders.
Yeah.
How do we get on the local panels? What's the actual space there? Is that of use to people?
Yeah.
Okay, so the local panel is great. How do we get there?
Okay. This is something which will change in the coming months. So there is a bigger project tracking along called the Future Procurement System. So if you've seen the New South Wales procurement site, if you've seen the federal procurement site, by ICT I think it's called, you know, you see supplier profiles, you see a centralised dashboard of how you can choose your suppliers. We don't have that currently. We are about to embark on that journey. A tender has gone out and we're in the final stages of evaluation. So that'll help joining the panels, because the third most common question I get asked is, we've seen these panels, they're all on the Queensland Contracts Directory, by the way. We've seen these panels for automation or for this or for that. Can we just join it? In most cases, the answer is no. These panels are established for a 2 or 3 year period, and they have renewal options, and they're done through an open market process. So if you've missed that initial time to get on, you have to wait for the renewal point, which is usually 3 years in. Now, this is something government is looking at closely, because is that still a realistic model? You know, given the way technology is changing, cybersecurity would be a prime example. Is it realistic to have these panels in place for 2 or 3 years and you can't get on? I would say no. So what we've been trying to do in our section with what we've got is actually refresh our panels more regularly. So we've just refreshed our main telco panel, and I think we've onboarded about 24 small businesses, which is great. So we are, and because there is a Queensland SME target, we're doing that purely to diversify and to give them the opportunity to get business. You don't have to be on a panel to sell to government. We have certain incentives under our small business policy, but the reality is that it will help you enormously if you are on a panel. So if you have something fairly service orientated, you can come and talk to me about the general services panel. That is the only panel which is currently open. It's an evergreen panel. So that'll transition to a new format next year, but it's called ICTSS 1303B, rolls off the tongue. I talk all in acronyms and numbers, that's all I ever talk about. I talk about that panel a lot, but it's a really it's a big focus for our area, because it's the only panel which is open, and it's the only panel where we have a huge presence of Queensland business. So I think they probably constitute half. I know there are I've seen a couple of suppliers are on that panel already. It doesn't guarantee you business, it just means you're on a panel and you've satisfied a requirement and you can be approached by a government buyer.
Thank you. There might be a few people that have some follow-up questions around that might talk to you later. Talk to me, Matthew, before we go to Tom and Sarah Jane, who are in the trenches, so to speak. But can you talk to me about, are there programs or are there areas that businesses, particularly in this room, need to know about? What are the programs that you're running around helping people with tendering processes? Is there any?
So most of that actually sits within a different, we have a category team, so we're very category focused. The whole model of government is very category focused. So within the Department of State Development, they do have tendering for government workshops. I think some of those are online. It's David Kay. So they're within a different portfolio to myself. My role is very stakeholder focused, so I tend to give more practical advice about the government saying this is what this means, and how you can actually get involved in something. So for programs, I think we do run some briefing sessions where we encourage suppliers to come and pitch. We have historically done some. We had a program called Testing Within Government about 4 or 5 years ago, which was, we would give funding to a startup who had an MVP. They would get a 3-month sprint with us, and then at the end of the process, we would say yes or no. So they had mixed success. The challenge for us wasn't actually sourcing the small companies; it actually was getting government departments to actually commit to that 3-month period. And unfortunately, the election was called right towards the end of the last one, which sort of put a bit of a dampener on it. But we saw some really good things out of that, and there's been programs here like Sparkplug. It is all about marketing yourself across the departments. You have to do it in parallel with, you may have your existing contacts and your executive contacts, but you do have to talk to the people on the ground, the operational procurement staff and those business areas, because they ultimately are going to want to engage your services. So the key thing to be aware of is the SME policy. Even if you're a startup, you are classed as a small business. And it's very Queensland focused now. So if your postcode doesn't start with a 4, you do not get the incentives under that particular policy. But there is a direct engagement model under that called SME Access, which again, all government buyers are very aware of, and they can engage you directly under that process.
Thank you. Tom, I'm going to throw to you if I can. So you've been working with SMEs who are looking at, being able to get more contracts. I mean, I must admit, once I realised how many times I got asked if I took credit card payments, and I just said yes without really taking credit card payments, and quickly worked out how to do that. It was amazing how much more work I got with a range of government departments. But can you talk to us a little bit around, some really practical, tangible tips that businesses in the room can be thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I could talk for ages on that, but I'll try and bigger ticket items. Okay, so there seemed to be a bit of interest in the panel arrangements earlier. Panels are great, and as Matthew said, definitely advantageous to get on, but we've seen so many businesses who get frustrated. They get onto a panel, right? They're approved, crack the champagne, celebrating away happily, and then they'll sit back and just sort of wait for the government revenue to come their way. It almost never actually happens like that. You know, the easy part is getting on the panel. It's what you actually do then that will really determine, I guess, how many opportunities you're going to uncover with government. And that piece right there, once you're on that panel, it's then getting that word out to the government decision makers and influencers. Don't neglect the influencers, and really engaging with government. And they don't want to be sold to. Everyone is trying to sell to government, and unless they actually ask you, say, look, you got 10 minutes, give me the story. What these decision makers and influencers, when you find them, they need to know who you are, right? They need to know the problem that you solve, the business problem that you solve. Right? That's the key things that they need to know, because government is only, if we work on a scale of 1 to 100, there's only 1 or 2% of the time they're going to need your product or service. But there's 350,000 small businesses in Queensland. So it's all about, before they even go to tender, having those decision makers aware of who you are, the problem that you solve, so that when they hit that buying zone, when they have that problem that your business solves, it's, hey, and you're on a panel, even better, call in ABC. We need to have a chat with them about a few things which we know that they can, that their business can help us with. So that's a key one. From our experience, and definitely from personal experience, you're probably not going to win the first time you submit to government. We took, I don't know how many we made took me years before one of my government contacts actually sat me down when I was moaning about losing another one. And they said, have you gone to a debrief? And I went, what's a debrief? They said, well, you can go to find out, sit down with government and find out exactly where, maybe not exactly, but find out that where your submission fell down, the strengths, what was good as well. Even if you win it, scream to you, go to a debrief, because you can get so many good things out of it. But don't do what I did the first time I went to a debrief. I was really angry and upset, and I didn't really get much out of that. They just went back to the default, which is price. Oh, you were too expensive. What I recommend there, if you get, well, firstly, always ask for a debrief, win or lose, and then about 2 weeks out from the debrief, send them a list of questions that you want answered, hopefully want answered, and give them the time, because the person you're going to meet with may not have even been involved with the assessment process. So if you give them that list of questions, it gives them time to go up, talk to the people that they need to get those answers, so that when you turn up, you're going to get a hell of a lot more intel as to where you went down and where you fell down. And the knowledge you can get from those debriefs will really help you refine your next submissions to government. I guess the last one, because of that, we know so many businesses, they put their heart and soul into a government submission, they see all these dollars and this is going to be life-changing and we're absolutely perfect for this opportunity, and they don't get it, and then they stop. They're sort of kicking cans, going, nah, government don't know what they're doing, we're the best, went to our competitor, and they absolutely just write off the government market. And that's a huge mistake, because most businesses fail the first time that they make a submission to government. It's the ones who persist and engage with government decision makers in the right way that ultimately are a lot more successful. So there's heaps of others, but yeah, that's a few.
Well, Sarah Jane, we might come to you if we can. Thanks, Tom. You're amongst it. You're doing work with government. Can you talk to us about, how you got there? Did you go to debriefs? Talk to us a bit about your experience.
Similar to Tom, all of those lessons that you learn along the way, like the fact that debriefs are a thing. It took me a few years before I realised that I could do that, and now we've built that into our process. So every single tender that we put in for. Part of our process is win or lose, we request a debrief. And I've learned so much from that process, and as the team, that's helped us to win more tenders. But it's all of those little things that you don't know when it comes to government procurement. So it's been just a long journey of, I think the first tender we did for government was probably 9 years ago. And that first one, I can tell you, was absolute rubbish. And all of the little things like, you respond to a section and you say, see above, or please see section 3.1, without understanding the procurement process and why that's an issue for the person sitting on the other side that's evaluating that tender. So after about 8 years of learning all the lessons, I came across a book written by Thomas, and I read that book and it said, don't make this mistake. I thought I made that one. Don't make this mistake. Yep, made that one. I made literally all of the mistakes in that book. So I highly recommend get a copy of Thomas's book. I don't get any kickback from that, but that will hopefully fast track your learning process so you don't have to learn the hard way like I did.
I was just going to comment about the tender process. So I used to be an IT procurement person, and I've written of tenders, and I would hope over the last sort of 5 to 6 years, government has become a lot more streamlined in what they go to market with. We're big advocates of early market engagement, more for the bigger pieces of work where, we don't want to issue out, request for information and expression of interest and then issue a tender out 4 months later. It's a very repetitive process. So we think we encourage all those departments to do their market research. We have a research services panel, which is fairly new and it's being heavily utilised. So when we do go to market, our requirements are very specific and targeted at the outcome we're trying to achieve, as opposed to asking 5,000 questions, and you lose the will to live, trying to respond to that. We fully recognise it's very costly in time and resources to respond to tenders, whatever the size, and obviously disappointing if you don't win. But to Thomas's point, keep trying, and if you don't get offered a debrief, let me know, because that's one of my bugbears, where some departments don't give timely debriefs, especially for the larger ones. I want to know, because I do talk to these procurement people, and on that point, when you do get a gig with government and it goes well, we like to showcase that. I meet with all the procurement people from all the departments and entities. We do advocate suppliers, and we do share good news stories, and some bad sometimes, but generally it's positive. So we're all about sharing that intel on who's doing a good job, again, with a focus on Queensland business being
If I could just add to that too, just on the tenders, if I could just get a raise of hands, who's actually registered on Q tenders? Yep. All right, so those of you who aren't, really probably register if you're interested in government work. But a lot of businesses, a lot of clients that we come across as well, they talk about their frustrations with not getting government opportunity, et cetera, and a bunch of other things. And then we always sit them down and say, all right, so what are you doing? And they go, oh, we're registered on Q tenders. Okay, what else? Well, we're registered on Q tenders. Now, this can vary between different government decision makers that we deal with, but give or take, depending on the person you speak to, only about 15 to 20% of what government procures comes directly from Q tenders. So if you think that you've covered all your bases by registering on Q tenders, there's 80%, give or take, that you're not getting any exposure to. So just be aware of that.
Absolutely. That's a key point. And as I said, there will be a new Q tender system within the next 12 months, which will be much more exciting and easier to use. So we're very excited about that.
So are we.
So similarly, local councils have tender platforms that they look at and that they're using. I know not everybody's here is looking at it from a local council perspective, but certainly, being able to think about where your services might be required across the state from a local council perspective can be really useful. And if I can share, some of the work that we've ended up doing in my business has been because we've actually worked with a council to be part of their tender team for something that they're looking at as well. So, there's opportunities there to look at how your services can be part of a bigger program or a bigger process that might be going into some of these tenders. I'm just wanting to give people a chance. Are there any? We've got other conversations that we want to have, but just given the information that you've heard from the speakers so far, have we got any questions from anybody in the room? Azra, let me just get you a microphone.
The question is for you, Matthew. My name is Asrar. I'm from the Tech Alliance on the Sunshine Coast. There are two questions, and they are, one is security. How much is security important, particularly in health and critical infrastructure? And, when it comes to policy making and stuff like that, do you even consider small businesses or universities for that matter?
Absolutely. So I think I've had more approaches from security suppliers in the past 12 months than ever. We have a cyber security unit within our department. So I'm based within the Department of Communities, Housing, Digital Economy. So we are essentially a strategic policy unit with various different sort of, public-facing services. I'm in ICT strategic sourcing. So CSU are certainly... They had a whole load of federal funding last year or the year before, and they are very much on the expansion programme. I also sit on an ICT industry reference group, whereby we meet with all the ICT associations, your AAAA. Actually, I think the Sunshine Coast one is just about to join. So it was a name I'd come across many years ago. I think it's Dr. Kaplan. Yes, yes. So he's actually joining our meeting. I think it's in about 3 weeks' time. So this meeting is with our agency and all the leads from Women in Technology. There's about 15 ICT associations. AAA probably is the most well-known one, but there's lots of smaller ones and lots of niche ones. So we have very regular conversations with them about what we're doing. And the three most, I think, prominent discussion points have been security, workforce transformation, and digital. And they are very current and ongoing themes. I was involved a couple of weeks ago in our main industry briefing, so that's the main government brief to industry, whereby departments going on. My microphone keeps going on and off all the time. I thought I was holding. Thank you. So it's called the Partners and Technology Briefing. So they've been in a bit of hiatus for the last 2 or 3 years, but it's the main platform whereby government spruiks out to industry what we're doing. So our Chief Customer Digital Officer spoke. That's Chris McLaren. He's been in that role for the last 12 months. So his role is very much to progress Queensland Government on this track of transforming all of our services to make them more citizen-friendly. It involves, transforming legacy systems. It's a whole myriad of things they're involved in programs very closely with Department of Tourism, Innovation and Sport. So Lee also spoke at that event, and it was very well received. So we will post the video today on our website, and it's recorded, it's streamed. So that's a very good insight into what's going on across the department. We typically have 3 speakers, and I'm looking at doing the next event, which hopefully will be health focused. So, yeah.
Anybody else got another question before we move?
So in the innovation space, sometimes organisations don't know that they need you. So I'm just wondering what the civil and polite way or approved way to approach government around a solution to a problem they may not realise they have, or a radical way of reconceptualising the space that they're in. So I think that's one of the big challenges we have in an innovative company, because when people talk about who are your competitors, we're like, the environment isn't even thinking about this problem in this way. So I'm sensitive to not wanting to be the blowhard who runs into a public official and be like, you totally need to use that thing. But what if we don't fit your box? What if we're not in the silo you have? Who do we talk to and how do we have a polite and civil conversation?
Yeah.
Oh, no, you got it.
Oh, very government now. Well, you can come and talk to me. I'm not in the innovation portfolio, but obviously a lot of the things we're trying to achieve in our category is to promote Queensland innovative companies. That's one of our core things we're trying to encourage, and on the mantra of what our chief customer digital officer was talking about was, things are going to change drastically in government about how, as we become more automated, as technologies evolve, we aren't going to be doing the same things in our workforce that we were 5-10 years ago, and it's happening now. So we need to prepare, and there's a huge knock-on effect, I think, to all of that. So there isn't a specific pitching area within our department where you can come and say, yes, you've got a problem with this. But we can, at this stage, it's something we're still working on. I mentioned before we had a program where we issued out problem statements. We had people in for a 3-month period. I'd love to see that happen again in the near future. I think it might. There's a much greater incentive now to do it. Now things have calmed down a little bit for government, given COVID and natural disasters. So I think it's an important one because, again, you're quite right. Some business areas don't realise they have a problem, and then they need to be shown the way. I mean, some business areas don't want to be shown the way. You have those discussions as well. But no, it's certainly something I think which is very important, and we'd like to incorporate more.
Thanks. I can add a couple of things to that because it is I hear your frustrations, and government can be a slow burn. Rarely are you going to go to government and say, "Hey, this is what we do," and they're going to jump at it straight away and go, "Great, here's $4 million, make it happen." Our advice, my advice is, you got to spread your network within the relevant decision makers and don't neglect the influencers. They may not sign on the dotted line, but if they're in the ear of those decision makers. So they need, again, I'll go back to, they need to know the problem that you solve, and absolutely emphatically must know the problem that you solve. And then it can be just a case of a slow burn. You just want to be filtering out some assets, we call them digital assets, to them over time. Once you've made that introduction, once you've asked permission, and then just send them the odd case study or send them the odd testimonial or video testimonial. Things that, again, I'll go back, do not sell. We don't want to be saying 2 for 1, end of financial year, anything like that, but just evidence that backs up what your solution is. And when these decision makers, and there's some really switched on decision makers within government, when they're looking at those sorts of assets and going, you know what, we actually are seeing a trend here. This company appears to have something that might address that solution. So you might accelerate that problem realization, if you like, but just do it without trying to sell. As soon as you're selling, you're one of the pack. So that evidence is really, we talk about evidence a lot. If you don't have evidence to back up what you're saying, you're really not going to get too much of a look in, government or private sector.
This is something that I've had personal experience with, being that we're a Queensland-owned and operated cloud hosting company and a competitor to Amazon AWS and Microsoft Azure. That's something that not a lot of people can wrap their head around. So for us, it's about generating brand awareness, and it's essential to get those first customer references. Once you've got those, people understand, oh, wait a second, you've done that for Virgin Australia, or you've done that for another state department. Tell me again what it is you do. As an example, the way that we landed Brisbane City Council, we were actually at one of the Twig events. We're at the showcase, showcasing the work that we'd done. People from Brisbane City Council happened to come along to that event. We had a little stand, we had some ATEC water bottles and some hats, and they came over and said, oh, what is it that you guys do? And after a 5-minute conversation, they said, whoa, we had no idea that you guys existed, and we want to work with you. obviously it's a no-brainer. You know, Brisbane-based cloud hosting company, of course they want to work with us, but they didn't know it was an option. So just being there in the right place at the right time meant that they knew who we are, what we were doing, and they were excited to work with us. Having said that, it was a slow burn. They had just re-signed their agreement with AWS, and they said when the agreement comes up, then they'll reach out and put a tender in market. Sure enough, that was a couple of years later. So it was a 4-year cycle from that first conversation before we actually signed the contract with Brisbane City Council. So yep, it's a slow burn.
I'm going to come back and ask some of the questions around what you wish you could have done differently, and you've maybe touched a little bit on that. But I guess the other thing just to flag as a small business, and I'm conscious that I'm regionally based, and so sometimes the problem that we solve is just networks and the fact that we live in places where some of the departments don't have a setup. But we ended up with a $250,000 contract because we knew people, and they didn't. And that was for a federal department, but we were based somewhere and it was actually cheaper for them to contract us to do their job than it was for them to set somebody up. And so again, for some of us, the geography and the location of where we're based and where our networks are is actually part of the problem that we're solving. So just don't undervalue who it is that you know and where you are, because particularly for some of the federal departments, it is much cheaper for them to engage us to deliver their work because we're already based there than it is for them to try and set somebody up and build that network from scratch. So that would just be my other piece. And if you're looking at some state and federal activity where there's an opportunity to collaborate with other SMEs or other businesses in your space can be really useful. And again, there's a few of us that across Queensland and across Australia work together on some of those projects because we can help them solve that geographic issue that they have. Sarah Jane and Tom, particularly for you two, you know, again, if you looked back a couple of years, what would you do differently? What do you wish you knew, other than that Tom's book was around, that we're all going to take a commission of from here? No. Just give us a couple more, you know, what would you do differently scenarios, Sarah Jane, if you can.
The big thing I would do differently is that I would have pursued it more. I would have put in for more tenders. I would have put myself out there, put my company out there more, and knocked on more doors and, hopefully gotten those gigs sooner. Yeah.
Can I ask, no, sorry, Tom, you go. What do you wish people knew?
Yep. Heaps of things, so many, but the big ones, I guess, the big one that, upon reflection, is I had no plan. There was no plan, there was no strategy. I was throwing darts blindfolded, and if I had some sort of plan and some sort of strategy to expand into government, then we would have done it a lot quicker. We would have cracked government a lot quicker, but sort of like a double-edged sword. We didn't have that plan, but I didn't know where to go. So that plan eventually came about through trial and error. But I would hazard a guess that most businesses here don't have the luxury of. I got the luxury of my boss said, I don't care how long it takes, you need to crack the feds and state government, and it took me 4 years. So we now have that plan. That plan is defined, but without that plan in the beginning, we spun our wheels a lot. Second thing as well, big business does this really, really well. I completely neglected it in the beginning, is partnership arrangements. Big business nail it, small business do it terribly. I would have passed up tens of millions of dollars worth of contracts because we looked at it and gone, we can only do 20% of that or 30% of that. So I didn't bother responding. If I I would have definitely have been building an ecosystem of partners who complement our business, or that business, but doesn't compete with them, and then we would have been able to bid on a lot more government contracts. So I love what you did at the start here, Julie, because I know for every business here, every person here, there's 2 or 3 businesses here which complements you but doesn't compete, and they're an absolute perfect potential partner for you. And they're as powerful, those partnerships are as powerful in the private sector, if not more powerful, than for, when you're submitting for government. Government love what government are happy to receive what they call collaborative bids, so that's a bunch of small businesses joining together to put one solution together for them. So that is that's a big thing that I would have done. We lost so many contracts because we just couldn't do it all, so why bother? But yeah, don't make that mistake.
I think just to build on that point, because there is an official 30% procurement target with Queensland SMEs, it's even more important to have that collaborative approach, because if you're not going to win something outright, you can possibly win something in cooperation. Those figures will be in the public domain. I mean, the target was 25% last year, so that means across the 6 categories, as an average, we have to spend 30%. So for the ICT category, we're currently tracking at about 13-14%. General goods and services, building, construction, maintenance are much higher. But the target this year is 30. The 2 previous years it was 25%, and we got 28% thereabouts for both of them. So we've surpassed the target. So this year will be interesting because it doesn't sound like it's very far away, but 30% is a 5% jump. So that's where I think our roles come in, and that we try and promote Queensland small business even more, and getting you on the radar of our networks so they can actually, strive towards the target, which is very much what we want to do. And prior to that, we already had a target in place for ICT SMEs globally, which I think 10 years ago was sitting at around 11%. So from any SME in the world, so that is tracking at around 24% at the moment. The Queensland SME target is a different thing, but it's all going in the right direction. So that's very encouraging.
So Matthew, while you've got a microphone that works, can I ask you a question, and then Sarah Jane, I'll come to you. We think we're awesome. We know that we can help solve the problems. We know we can do a good job. Having said that, what are some of the, give us what the government's looking at from maybe a risk perspective? What are red flags that you might see? Give us the challenges. What's the bits that we need to know about in terms of what might be a challenge for us engaging?
I think the biggest challenge for any company approaching government for the first time is that perhaps unfair perception of risk on government's part. You're a new company, an emerging company. They've been used to dealing with the data threes of the years and years, so they're slightly out of their comfort zone. And the good news is that a lot of the buyers from 20 years ago have now left, and we have probably a few more pragmatic buyers across government who are driven by process, who do have to do certain things. But I think if you can present yourself, when I first started in government, and when we were part of the same department, and I'd meet all these startup companies, and they would approach some of our networks, and the first thing the more traditional buyer would say is, "Oh, are you on a government panel?" "No, I've just sorry, we can't deal with you." They can. So a lot of my role is also about gently, strongly, having conversations with buyers about what they can and can't do within the realms of their own processes in their department and what they feel comfortable with. So my advice is always the same. Do your research on the department, look at some of their strategies. Most of the departments should publish their strategies. I've got a pamphlet with me today about the digital strategy. Have a look where you see you could possibly fit into that. Make your approach to they're called vendor managers. They're mainly procurement people. Their details are in the public domain. Make your approaches to the procurement, because you do need to approach them in collaboration with approaching other business areas, and just almost feed them a synopsis of what you think you could do. A bit like the previous TWIG program, where it was based on challenges. Those challenges have now changed, I think. So what we also try and do through the pit briefings is tell you what we're looking for. And that's sometimes difficult, because obviously departments can be very large. They have all different agendas and want different things. So I think it's very important to have, I'm a big fan of the capability statement. The good one page, which makes it very clear to that prospective buyer and business owner what you do and what your niche is. If you've got a good case study reference, if you're already on a panel, whether it be interstate or here, great, reference it, reference the fact you're a Queensland small business, there's a target, we know we have to beat it, reference your social procurement avenues, so what social procurement do you support, Queensland government's a big white ribbon proponent, so anything you're doing which is publicly good, put it on your website, because the buyers are primed to look for those types of things. And that's becoming even more important.
Sarah Jane, what are you thinking about while you're hearing these comments, and what's some more feedback for the room?
I just wanted to build on what Thomas said about partnership, and don't be afraid to reach out to much bigger companies and build relationships with much bigger companies. Those networks that you're building at events like these can come in really handy, and you just might know, you might not know what sort of job might come up in the future where you think, oh yeah, that person that I met in the room is in that space. And we've had examples where we've partnered with Data3 for a very large federal tender that there's no way in the world that we would have been able to land it or deliver it in our own right. We needed a much larger partner to achieve that. But we really complemented each other in terms of capability for that particular tender. In going through that process with them, we actually learned a lot because they had a completely different tendering process to us. The first step for them was, okay, we'll start with risk analysis. And we thought, oh, we don't start with risk analysis when we look at tenders. And then they looked at lobbying. They said, okay, we'll need to lobby people down in Canberra. And I thought, oh, we don't start, lobbying anyone. Maybe what does that mean? And so in the end, we decided that we weren't actually going to pursue submitting for that tender. However, we built a relationship with Data3 and we learned a heck of a lot. So we gained a lot from that experience. So it's definitely worth doing.
I'm going to just do a little flag for a future event while we're talking. So we've got the big conference happening in March where we are looking at what's happening across government. Part of that is to have a startup alley. So if you're a business that is looking to engage across government, Queensland government, you might be interested in an expression of interest that's open at the moment so that we can have startups at the event who have got a chance to kind of pitch your idea, service or product to government. So if you haven't come across that yet, track me down or look on the Office of the Chief Entrepreneur's social media and you'll find the expression of interest for that. Because it is a really good way to be able to talk about what it is that you're doing, what your solution is and where you see that fitting. I'm going to ask our speakers if you can think of if there's anything else that you wanted the group to know before we go to questions. And I guess the other thing too for us in the room, one of the ways that we can help provide solutions to government is being across what are the challenges or what are their plans across our region or industry. So if you're in a health space, what are the priorities for Queensland government in health for the next 5 years and where do you fit into that? And what are the documents that you need to have a look at and how are you referencing that in your conversations? So again, whether it's industry or regional perspectives, how do you know what the government's looking at and where they're starting to look at their investment so that you can see where you fit into that and where you can help solve some of those problems? It can be a really useful space to look at. Tom, I'm going to start with you at that end if I can. What else, before we go to questions from the room, what else would you like people to know about in terms of this piece of procurement today?
I'm a big fan of questions, so I'll keep this short and give you guys as much time to ask of us whatever you want. But really, just the fact that you're here, right, you see that there's a government opportunity there, but there might be a few of you who just sort of don't know how to get or processing things involved with government. Yes, it can be complicated, and yes, you'll read a tender document and you'll look at it and you'll think they're speaking a different language here, and yes, you probably will fail. But the opportunity that small business has with government, especially leading into over the next 10 years leading into the Olympics, is massive. That 30% target, around about 8 billion, give or take, are the figures that I've sort of been given. So there's 8 billion every year, which has been slated to go to the small business, small medium business sector. So there's a huge opportunity, and frustrates the hell out of me when I hear a business talking about how much work they're doing to, you know, they've got to do all this, to jump through all these hoops to close a private sector deal, when you have this massive opportunity with government just sitting there. And quite frankly, we look at this quite frequently about how many businesses are actually submitting for these tenders. And there was one, a $1.2 million cleaning contract we came across the other day, and 2 businesses in Queensland bid for that. It's a massive, huge opportunity there. But that's not just a one-off. This is quite prevalent. So big opportunity there. Small business has a really nice, there's a lot of incentives in place for small businesses. So yeah, definitely consider it.
I'm also going to do a plug for a workshop that you're going to run with people. There's a QR code that we'll make sure people have got access to later if you want to register to do a workshop with Tom in coming weeks. So we'll make sure everybody gets that information for those who have registered. Matthew?
No, really to build on Thomas's point about the Olympics particularly, I guess. I think you'll start to see a lot more activity in that space, as we're now within 9 years of it actually happening. Sounds like a long way away, but it won't be. So if you've not already seen, and this is not related to the Olympics, on the Q10 site there's the forward procurement pipeline. So it's embedded a little bit in the centre. It's a dashboard, and all the categories publish their procurement activity more of a significant nature. So I collate the one for ICT, and it also, you can do searches on spend, on region, on the categories themselves. So it's not perfect. We are looking at improving it, but it's the main sort of heads up in association with our industry briefings about what procurement opportunities are coming your way. So make sure you have a look at it. The ICT category spends about $1.3 billion a year across 4 subcategories. So there's a lot of business goes through there, and that's remained fair even during COVID and natural disasters. That's remained fairly constant. So I only see that growing. So second piece, be persistent, be concise. Be targeted, do your research when you approach the departments, because they are a collection of departments under the Queensland Government banner. They're all a bit different. Some are, I meet with them all very regularly. Some are a bit frosty compared to others. But again, if you tweak, and I think back to your point, sometimes it can be being in the right place at the right time. I've certainly seen a lot of business opportunities come from the Queensland road shows, which all went around the state. Lots of people connecting, getting together, things like this. But it can sometimes be a slow burn. Government contracts are in place for usually a 3-year period. There has to be a compelling reason to swap them out, and things like the target is a compelling reason. So it's all about giving everyone a fair opportunity.
Can you just go back and say where on the website? What website did you have?
So on the Q-Tenders homepage, literally in the middle, it's in, I think, the second paragraph, it just refers to a forward procurement pipeline. And if you click on it, it takes you through to the Power BI tool, which then has a category layout of, these are the 6 categories, and you click on the category for general goods and services, and it will list every single department who have posted things on there, and then all the regions, and you can do search by spend. So it's a useful tool. It needs to be improved a little bit. We need to get more content on there. But the big departments especially always put on transport and main roads would be my model child, because they're always very good at putting their things on there.
I would say definitely keep pursuing working with government, because it's great. Once you do get the job, I think they're a fantastic client to work with. They're really organised. They will have a long customer lifetime. So it's definitely worth pursuing. And I want to congratulate everyone in this room for showing up, because that's what you need to keep doing. Keep showing up. Even when you see those, subscribe to the Advance Queensland email newsletters, those workshops, free workshops that come through. And I know in the past I've thought, I already know all about that. I'm too busy to go to that. And then I think, maybe I'll just go along. And then there I am taking notes and think, I didn't know that. And it might be just one little thing that you learn that really unlocks something for you moving forward. I know one of the Queensland Government workshops that I did on tendering, I think it was run by Impact Innovation, that really highlighted to me a lot of those mistakes that I had been making. And if I hadn't shown up to that workshop, then I think I would just still continue making those mistakes. Similarly, keep showing up with trying to get those opportunities with government, whether it's building those relationships, generating brand awareness, or submitting tenders. Some of the jobs that we've won through public tender, when we looked at it, we thought, oh, we don't meet all of the mandatory criteria, or we've got something that's a bit more innovative than what they've asked for. We still put in the tender anyway, and when you get through to that shortlisting stage, there can be a bit of negotiation where a lot of departments and agencies are genuinely interested in supporting small businesses, and they will reach out and ask those questions and clarify so that they can understand your offer and what it means for them. So keep showing up.
Matthew's going to be around later to talk to people if you've got specific questions. I'm also going to do a terrible thing and call somebody out in the crowd. James, can you wave your hand? Don't everybody rush James when we break. But James is one of the other procurement people with Queensland Government, with Department of Energy and Public Works. So both James and Matthew will be able to have some conversations with people when we break. Have you got a microphone there? Do you want to say hello?
Yes, apparently I do. James Wilson. I'm from the Department of Energy and Public Works. I'm in the Queensland Government procurement policy area. So, very happy to have a chat.
Great, thanks, James. Can I ask who's got a question? Question in the room, plenty. Thanks, Ian.
Hi everyone, I'm Kimisa from Think Place, and I was talking about some of the emerging and current challenges that have been mentioned today, so security, workforce and digital transformation, as well as the upcoming Olympics. I wanted to know, based on your experience and what you've seen in the market so far, what you know about how government is thinking and buying differently. That's my question.
I've noticed a trend over the past 9 years, which is 9 years ago, they were always asking about your quality management system. Lots and lots of questions about quality and process. And now there's lots and lots of cyber security questions. So in our space, that probably maybe 30% of our time in tendering goes into that cyber security response piece, which is a benefit for us because that's what we specialise in.
I think, generally speaking, I mean, for the last sort of 8-9 years, the direction of government has been to move to an as-a-service model. So, we didn't want to buy, huge, chunks of hardware and then maintain them. We wanted someone else to do it for us. That's still very much the strategy of government, but obviously the whole digital layer puts a new component on that. So I think I'm not so directly involved in procuring things like that. I've got my pamphlet with me today from the Chief Digital Officer, who actually outlines all the areas he's going to be focusing on, because it's very much behind the scenes. Within our area, within our department, we have Queensland Shared Services, we have Smart Service Queensland, we have SciTech, we have lots of business style operating entities who provide services, as do other larger departments. So I think automation, probably is the one I'm hearing the most about, how that's going to impact on the workforce. How can we reskill? Public service also has an ageing population. Lots of people are going to be retiring in the next 4 or 5 years. Not me, unfortunately, but far too young. But I think that's going to be an issue. We're going to lose a lot of intellectual property from people moving on who've been there for 20, 30 years, and I think there's a huge percentage leaving. So I think that opens up the opportunity to actually change processes, and we still have an accounts lady in our team who literally reconciles invoices. She goes to the photocopier, prints them all off. She's still there, and she'll go eventually, but it's a necessary job. I mean, she no one else wants to do it, but she loves it. She's in SAP all the time doing the churning, but those jobs will gradually go, and I think we'll see opportunities galore, I hope, We just need to, work on some of our processes within the departments to make it more conducive to actually engaging the startup community.
Hi, I had a question for Tom. You've mentioned twice now, don't forget the influencers, and that's one of my key takeaways for today. I just wanted to know, how do we find those influencers, and how do we approach them, especially if they're not direct contacts that we have?
Yep, that's a big question. I'll start the answer and maybe we can talk a bit more on it later. You're here right now. There's decision makers and there's decision influencers right in this room. So actually, I'm going to do that again that you did. If you're with state, local or federal government, can you put your hand up? Have a look around right now. Okay? These are the people that need to know who you are and the problem that your business solves. And coming to events like this is a really, really good way to go about that. The big conference that's coming up, and state government in particular put on lots of different events, and please I don't mean anything too bad by this, but there'll be events, right? I've walked away from events, 2 hours of my life I'll never get back. But usually I'll find someone around me at that event and be able to form some sort of relationship with them. But there's other events, hopefully this one today, where you walk away going, that was really cool. I picked up some really, really good things. There's a few new decision makers who we've got who are happy to receive some content from us from time to time. So that's a really, really good way. People still like to do business with people, and governments, decision makers, influencers, they still like to meet you, especially small business. And always drop that into if you're a small business and you're a regional business as well, let them bring that into the conversation. LinkedIn is also a good way to find decision makers and influencers and instigate introductions. Just using those methods. Again, when you're talking to them, don't give them the two-minute pitch. If there's one thing I say today that you take away, if you sell, you're in the barrel with everyone else trying to sell to government. So don't be arrogant, but just be confident in what you do and the problem you solve. And eventually, or quickly, sometimes you'll hit in what we call the 3% zone, which is that buying zone. You'll talk to them and go, hey, this is the problem we solve. And they go, crap, we got that problem. We need to talk. Happens, not that often, but it does happen. But it's not going to happen unless you're actually having these introductions with these decision makers and influencers.
I'm going to throw something in really quickly around influencers, in that some of the government departments have advisory councils. So there's a Queensland Small Business Advisory Council. You can nominate for that. They have open nominations at times to join that. You get to then sit around the table and talk about what a small business need across Queensland. So I randomly ended up on that a few years ago, probably because I was regional and a woman, and that was very politically correct at the time to be. No, I don't know. But so there's an Innovation Advisory Council that sits for the Innovation Department. We'll be having some nominations for that later. If you Google Queensland Government boards, you can actually upload your resume and get responses around when there's board roles that come out. Often they're volunteer boards, some of them have sitting fees, but again, that's your way to kind of give back to the community, to be known around those tables, and then to potentially look at how that happens from a work perspective. So I know there's a Small Business Advisory Council, and I know there's an Innovation Advisory Council, because I've been involved with both of those, and you end up getting to sit and meet and chat and travel and do things. So I think both of those are really good ones. Is there another question that we've got in the room? One more before we break and people can have a chat.
You spoke about Q tenders and registering for that website. In a past life, when I was involved in ICT procurement, there was also emphasis on Q Assure. Is that still a thing right now?
Q Assure Ready it's a thing for the Chamber of Commerce Industry Queensland. It's not a requirement for selling to Queensland Government. So that association came about 6-7 years ago, where we had a very old-fashioned GITC accreditation process. It was one person in a room with a cat going through paperwork, and it just took forever to get accredited. I'm not exaggerating. And so when the government came in 2012, one of the first things they wanted to do was move that onto an online platform. So at that time, CCIQ was emerging. I think actually was the previous Small Business Commissioner, Maria Adshed, was involved, and we basically got them to do 80% of the application process online through the QAssure banner. So when that association finished, when QITC, which is our current framework, came out in 2017, that requirement went. So it's still, I think it's still a worthwhile requirement in many ways. It's, you know, it's a good website. It gives you exposure. But if any government buyer is saying to you, "What's your QAssure number?" you don't need one. But you can still get it independently. It's just not a requirement for selling to Queensland government.
Team, we wanted to make sure that you've got plenty of time to talk to each other, to come and ask questions of our fantastic panel, as well as the people who were brave enough to raise their hand and say that they worked for Queensland Government. So hopefully you remembered one of their faces and you can also track them down. As I said before, both James and Matthew are going to find some space outside here shortly and be there for the next hour or hour and a half to be able to answer any more questions that you have. Can I please get you all to give our fantastic panel a very big round of applause? We are following up today's conversation with a workshop, so the QR code's on the screen now, so please, that will be working with Tom in a couple of weeks. I'm going to say the date, but it'll be wrong, so it'll just be safer for you to do the QR code. These sort of events don't happen without a lot of work behind the scenes. So as we finish and head for our morning tea, can I please ask us all to give Stephanie, who works here at the Precinct and is part of the events team, a very big round of applause, Steph, for all of your work. Thank you all for coming. Please, let's keep the conversations going now, but let's all move and have some morning tea and continue the conversations. Thanks, everybody.